So, I had just moved to Autumn County with my little girl. She's turning 9 years old, and yeah, I love my little Clarissa more than life itself. We moved to Autumn County recently because her mother, my wife, had recently passed away. So her and Clarissa were really close, and it hit her a lot harder than it hit me. It seemed like everything back in River City just reminded her that her mother was gone. And after 6 months of all of that, we decided that maybe a change of scenery might be better. So we moved to Autumn County. Now, it wasn't like we just moved there in the middle of everywhere and dropped everything. I work from home most days, and I was able to just transfer to fully online easily. And Autumn County, despite being miles from the River City Center, had really good internet connection. Plus, the home we moved into used to belong to my wife. For a long time, she talked about fixing it up, and that way we could all visit as a family, like go there for an autumn festival or for Feralia. Yeah, I should have took her up on that offer sooner. But this story is not about that. So in this new house, my little girl Clarissa finally started to open up again. She smiled for the first time in months, and she ran through the leaves. I don't know if you've ever seen a little kid run through the leaves, but it's a lot of fun. Just seeing how much they smile and seeing how much they enjoy themselves, enjoy the crinkling and throwing it up in the air and running around. It reminded me of what I used to do when I was her age. So I joined her, and for hours that's what we did, just run through all the leaves. I don't know what it is about Autumn County, but the weather here had always just seemed so perfect. The air was always crisp, and it always felt like it was harvest season just around the corner. My wife said it had something to do with some unique attribute of the climate, but that it was always both growing season and harvest season. I don't know. But all I did know is it meant that there were tons of leaves year round. So after playing in the leaves for hours, my daughter asked when we were going to get a pumpkin for Feralia. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the tradition of Feralia, all the costumes and candy and sweets and like pumpkins, all that fun stuff. So I agreed that we should go get a pumpkin. Luckily for us, our house is only about 2 miles away from the pumpkin house. The pumpkin house is kind of a local attraction in Autumn County, a big pumpkin patch that went on for miles. But it wasn't just pumpkins. They also had corn mazes, hay rides, and just general great attitude. They even had year-round haunted houses. A fantastic place to visit if that's your thing. Fortunately, that was Clarissa's thing. I'm a bit more neutral about Feralia and all its traditions, but my wife and Clarissa, they absolutely loved the spooky aspect. They loved all the scary things, they loved all the sweet things, and they loved just having fun with it. So, we went to the pumpkin house, and my little Clarissa just lit up even more than when she was playing in the leaves. I could barely keep up with her. She just loved running ahead and seeing all of the costumed performers, seeing the scarecrows, the carved pumpkins. I know. She had more fun in that moment than she had before. And finally, reached a point where she found her perfect pumpkin. It was a bit larger than a normal pumpkin. Looking at it, I want to say it weighed about 20 pounds, give or take. So the thing was heavy. But luckily, the farmer provided us with a cart to carry it. When we cut the stem and lifted it, I noticed that the sign next to it said that this was the scarecrow's share. Curious about this, when I took it back to the farmer to purchase, I asked him about the scarecrow share. There, he explained one of the weirder traditions of Autumn County. You see here? Here in Autumn County, anyone who works the fields gets their share of the crops. Now, the scarecrows, they work harder than any of us. They're always there every day, every night, keeping the crops safe. Now, without them, we wouldn't have any harvest. So, a portion of our harvest goes to them. If you took this from the scarecrow's share, well, that just means it was the scarecrow's favorite. So, I'm glad your little girl loved it. This was a bit strange, but I figured it was just some innocent thing. Just an innocent Feralia tradition. So, taking the pumpkin home, we got ready to cut it. Now, I did the actual cutting myself because my little Clarissa wasn't old enough to do so, but I took the knife and I began to cut around the stem, carving it carefully so that way it could be put back. While we did that, I told her about my own Feralia traditions, about how when I was younger we used to make cookies that were shaped like bones, about how we would leave little treats outside for the wild dogs, and even how at the very end of the festival we would get a big fire going and make sure that it was filled with the bones of all the meat we'd consumed throughout the year. Now that tradition, I don't quite know where it comes from, but it was a lot of fun growing up. But with this new pumpkin cut out, I removed the stem and looked down at the pumpkin guts. They were orange and stringy like normal, so I took the scraper and I began to scrape the inside of it. Now this is where things started to get weird. I felt something crawling along my hand. Pulling my hand out and seeing the guts, the thin stringy guts around my fingers, I went to wash it off. And when I washed it off, something started crawling. Something with many legs was crawling across my hand. These were spiders. Not just any spiders though, these spiders were orange, and it turns out those little guts I was looking at, that was their orange web. So obviously I had to shake them off and try to wash them off. And then when I finally got done screaming and getting them off of me, I then tried to spray around the kitchen to make sure I didn't miss any. Now little Clarissa, she thought this was the best thing ever. She was hoping she got a spooky pumpkin, and she thought the spiders were really spooky. What I did once I finally got done spraying the kitchen was I took the pumpkin and dumped it out into the compost. Once it was dumped out into the compost to rot, I told Clarissa we would go back to the pumpkin house tomorrow and pick out a better pumpkin. She was a little sad that she didn't get to carve this pumpkin, but she understood. So the next day we went down to the pumpkin house again, and I spoke with the farmer, let him know that the pumpkin was full of spiders. "Well, that's interesting," he said. "Never seen a pumpkin full of spiders before. But tell you what, since for your trouble, you get another pumpkin for free, and then we'll give you a second pumpkin. Just think of it as our way of saying sorry." I reluctantly accepted, but we went to go pick out 2 pumpkins this time. Clarissa picked out another pumpkin that she said looked like the spookiest out there, while I picked a nice, safe-looking pumpkin. Now, carrying these pumpkins back to my car in the cart, we took them home. This time, we carved it outside on the porch, because this time if there was something inside of it, I didn't want it in my house. So, out on the porch, I started by carving my pumpkin. I stabbed the top and removed the stem. Sure enough, there was nothing inside but seeds and guts. Removing the guts and the seeds with the scraper, I then showed Clarissa how to make those little dots with the pincher. And once the line was made with the pincher, I was able to carve it out. She really, really loved getting to draw on the pincher. She said it was just like drawing, which I guess in a way it was. But after my pumpkin was fully carved out and we had a nice smiling pumpkin for me, she said she wanted a scary one for her. I agreed we would make it scary, but first we would have to remove its stem. So I took my knife and tried to stab by its stem, but I couldn't go through all the way. The knife only made it in less than an inch before it stopped. I tried stabbing in somewhere else near the stem. Didn't work. Tried somewhere else yet again, and it didn't. At this point, I was a bit confused. I figured either the stem extended underneath the pumpkin further, or quite possibly there was a second pumpkin growing inside. I told Clarissa about that when I was a young child, about how back when we were young, we would even find pumpkins with pumpkins inside. It was a sweet thing, and I told her maybe we were lucky and we got 3 pumpkins instead of 2. So Clarissa suggested I try cutting the bottom, because that's what her teacher suggested. I was a bit reluctant because it wasn't traditional, but I figured, why not? Nothing bad was going to happen. Sure enough, I was to cut into the bottom, and once the bottom was finally cut open, I set the pumpkin down on the porch and lifted it up by its stem. What was sitting on the remaining pumpkin slice was big and covered in guts. As I brushed the guts aside, trying to see what was inside, trying to see if it was a little pumpkin or stem or whatever it was, when I removed the orange guts and the seed, what I saw underneath looked back at me. It had 2 empty sockets, and underneath the orange, it was gleaming white. When I got done screaming, I called the local sheriff about the skull that was found in the pumpkin. Again, Clarissa thought it was an amazing thing, just the spookiest thing ever to have been found inside a pumpkin. But I told her specifically not to touch it, because that we didn't know what it was, or if it was evidence. It took the sheriff damn near 2 hours to show up, but when he did, he took one look at the skull inside. "You know that's not a real skull, right?" he said. What do you mean it's not a real skull? It's very clearly a skull." The sheriff sighed and took out his knife and then cut a piece of the skull off. Sure enough, it was gourd flesh underneath. Somehow, the farmer at the pumpkin house had managed to grow a gourd in the shape of a human skull inside another pumpkin. I didn't even know that was possible. But how did they do that? I asked the sheriff. He sighed and put away his knife. The farmer down at the pumpkin house had been doing this for a long time. Some say he's a follower of Pomona, and that's why he can do such amazing things. I don't know how he does this, but it's harmless. Now, hearing that was harmless, Clarissa ran up to me. "Can I keep it, Daddy? Can I please keep it?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say more than anything. But I decided it would be best just this once to say yes. I hadn't seen Clarissa so happy since her mother died. And I decided if a little spooky thing kept her happy, well, why not? As it got closer to Feralia, we got ready for it. I got my little girl a little fairy outfit. She loved looking up like the fairies. She loved doing the multiple eyes and the scary teeth with it. But she also got to wear colorful wings and a little dress, so couldn't complain too much. So when we went out for Feralia and collected candy and treats and even in stickers and tattoos, we came back to my house. On the porch was first the carved pumpkin with a little candle inside, still lit. And sitting next to the pumpkin was the skull. Well, I guess you would say the gourd skull. But we just thought of it as a skull ever since. And then finally, on the other side of the skull, standing like a guard, was the pumpkin I carved. It was nice, not scary. I figured it was harmless. But that night, when little Clarissa went into the house first, I realized something was tracking into the house. At first I thought it was something she stepped in, but then I realized the footprints were mine. So I followed them, trying to figure out how bad the extent was, and I saw that it led outside. Whatever I was trailing smelled bad, and it was a brownish red. When I finally went outside, I saw that it pooled on my front porch. And then taking my flashlight out on my phone, I followed that trail and realized that where it was pulling from was from my pumpkin. Where the candle was lit, red liquid was flowing out of my pumpkin's mouth, eyes, and nose. That little happy face seemed to be mocking me now. The little orange flame was more red than orange when it reflected off the pool. If I didn't know any better, I would say that the fluid coming out was some kind of blood. But knowing that was impossible since it was just a pumpkin, I figured it was some kind of sap or something. Cleaning up the mess in my house and then off the porch, I figured that was that. The next day, though, when I went to dump the pumpkins, mine was a lot heavier than it was before. So, removing the stem and looking inside the pumpkin, I saw two eyes look back at me, and I dropped the pumpkin into the compost pile. I ran before I called the sheriff. Inside that pumpkin, somehow, it was the head of the farmer. But it wasn't dead like I thought it was. Oh, it was bleeding, and it was severed, but the eyes were blinking, and the mouth was gasping. And I could very, very clearly see what it was mouthing towards me. Help me. When the sheriff did come, finally, he removed the offending pumpkin and the severed head. He didn't tell me what was going on. Only thing he said was not to tell anyone else. So, why am I telling you guys this? Just on the eve of this year's Feralia? Well, I went down to the pumpkin house this year, and I found that the scarecrow's share was a lot bigger this year. And I saw that the farmer was still around, and he even winked at me. Well, thanks for coming back this year. Just letting you know, my family's coming around for the holidays. Thank you so much for listening. I'm glad everyone here liked it. Just a clarifying point, Feralia was the Roman name for their equivalent to a Halloween celebration, borrowed from the Celtic Samhain or Samhain, however you want to say it. But yes, thank you for that, and you have a good rest of your night. Good night.